The Talk Station presents Faith Matters, a look at contemporary stories and issues from a faith perspective. While this is a pre-recorded show, we are interested in your ideas, comments, and questions, and we urge you to email them to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I give you my life.
And now on the Talk Station, Faith Matters.
And welcome to Faith Matters for this week. Good to have you along with us here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And joined by Reverend Robert Cornegie of Chapel by the Sea, and also from the United Methodist Church, St. Peter's United Methodist, is Carl Zorowski, and also Bishop Doc Loomis is with us today. And as we speak about some of the first articles that we want to consider, a couple of articles that talk about the Pope going to Cairo and a trip that is supposedly about world peace and about Islam, the Eastern Orthodox Church, and the Roman Catholic Church actually coming together for an annual conference, but has a distinctly different feel to it. From a website that is translated into English, so I'm going to have a little difficulty with it, called Asharq al-Awsat, is Cairo. Asharq's World Peace Forum absolves heavenly religions from terrorism, and it involves the Grand Imam of Al-Ashar, is Ahmed al-Tayyib, and the Archbishop of Constantinople, Patriarch Bartholomew I, at the opening of the International Peace Conference in Cairo. So before getting into this, just the event itself, and Doc, let me start with you. Just the event itself brings together, and then Pope Francis joining them as well for this, is a big deal. I mean, that's what another article is going to talk about, is that this is major.
Sure it is. First of all, it's a double papal. You've got two popes there. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Don't see that very often.
Yeah, Pope Benedict went as well.
Benedict XVI's there as well. It's a big deal because it's being hosted by a mosque and religious learning center there, which has a very interesting and new president. Did you notice that in the article? No. Yeah. The fellow that's the new president there is at Al-Azhar, was put in place during Hosni Mubarak's administration. He's only been there like 5 or 6 years. Mm-hmm. And you may remember that back in 2011, the Pope spoke out against the bombings that had happened in Alexandria and that area, and it
didn't go over well.
Not at Al-Azhar and not in the nation of Egypt at all. People got really upset. But it's very interesting. Now there's kind of a new head imam, the president of this place, and he seems to be quite a moderate by all I can tell. And in his moderation this is a significant change in the way that they're responding to the Pope calling out the bombings right now, particularly of the yes. Coptic Christians. But it's a really big deal because it's two groups that you just don't think you might think of them as a groups of 3 or 4 or 5 world religions coming together, but this is a really big deal. And I think, frankly, the Egyptians are a little bit scared that they've determined that the enemy is no longer the West. I mean, you think about what the Pope represents. He rarely represents the mm-hmm. West in a very spiritual way. And imagine. So what's important about the event is imagine how significant it is that they now are viewing the enemy within as greater than the enemy without in the West. I mean, that's a major paradigm shift.
In this article, in this original article, again translated into English, part of it says that there is an essence that's being destroyed, an essence of humanity that's being destroyed by conflicting thoughts about what religion stands for, and this is really very different from how we've seen. This is from this Islamic Center, and this is very different from how we've seen this expressed. Carl, do you see that this is, and also into the Protestant world, that we ought to be paying attention to what is happening here?
I do. We definitely need to be paying attention to this. We need to get back to what is the foundation of our faith, our religious system, because we have so much division just going on within Christianity today. Why is it that so much of the world looks at the Christian church as almost being a terrorist organization? You know, we read in the paper and see on the news that we are filled with hate and bigotry. That's not what we're called to preach. We're called to preach love of God, love of neighbor. Those were the two things Jesus said were the most important. Love God with all your heart, love your neighbor as yourself. And the fact that these groups are getting together, and this one group is saying, hey, you know what, there is a lot of problems in the world. We're blaming other people. Maybe we need to examine what we're doing. Does the church here in America, the Protestant church, do we need to do that too?
Yeah.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. Robert, again, this is a part of the quote of the objective of the conference was to address a message to the whole world, call for peace between religious leaders. And it says, again, the Islamic seminary that sponsors it says that bloody armed conflicts have contradicted religious values and humanitarian ideals. I mean, they're taking a very different stance. I mean, we don't have a body of Islam that can say, okay, stop this to everyone. But this is as close as it's come.
Well, it's I think it's important to note that this is happening in Cairo, Egypt, where Egypt just went through basically a military coup and threw out the Muslim Brotherhood, which is the big radicalism that we're experiencing in the world now has come out of two schools. Well, more than that, but mostly what we've seen is the Islamic Brotherhood, the Muslim Brotherhood that came out of the Cairo school, that group, and the Wahhabism that came out of Saudi Arabia. And then you have out of Iran, you have the other side of it. Those two are Sunni. This one, the Iranian side, is the Shiite group. But this is significant that the right now there's basically the military has put in a person to lead Cairo or Egypt away from the apocalypse. They're trying to settle this thing down. And so it's significant that this took place there. And that we've also have two popes who are very different. Benedict is very different or Francis is very different than Benedict. And so, their positions on that. So yeah, it's a dramatic moment.
Does this affect or show a decline of the Muslim Brotherhood?
In Egypt, it definitely does. This could not have happened, I don't think, before.
In the article in Crux, which comments on the Catholic issues, it says, for one thing, the political context in Egypt is different. In 2011, the government, then President Hosni Mubarak, was facing widespread protests and eventually would be swept from power less than a month later. Some of Mubarak's critics at the time even suggested that he was actually behind the attack on the Alexandria Church in a desperate attempt to justify a widespread military crackdown that might blunt the protest movement. In that context, the government wasn't in the mood to brook any external criticism. And now apparently times have changed, and we are seeing that there is a possibility there that you may have, maybe from seminaries, which is Muslim seminaries, which is where it's going to need to come, is more ideas that ISIS, Al-Qaeda does not represent Islam. I mean, is that the hope?
Well, that was the heading of the article, basically. Yeah. One of them was that they basically are going to present a charter that says that the Orthodox Islam, if you will, at least their flavor of it, is absolved of any of the extremist violence that is being done kind of in the name of Allah, but they're saying, no, this has nothing to do with Allah and the Quran and their brand of Islam.
It's an interesting note, Carl, too, as we have just been talking about, and probably in our churches, about Jesus appearing to the disciples. And what does he say when he shows up?
He says, peace be with you.
And when Pope Francis said that, they applauded. So that's a sign of respect to say that in their culture. So,
well, and he said it in Arabic. Yeah,
right. He said it in Arabic.
He said it in Arabic, which was the they love that.
So, can we, again, back to the original question, Doc? I guess is this the big deal that maybe we can jump off on? I mean, that we can build on out of this?
We meaning our church here?
Any churches, all churches.
This reminds me so much of Ezekiel. I can't remember where it is, 12 or 13, where the Jerusalem's coming under siege, and what's the line? It says, they mislead the people and say, peace, peace, where there is no peace. Yeah. I mean, the world we live in is, there are a lot of people yelling, peace, peace, where there is no peace. And I do have a concern from a Christian perspective. I have a concern that it's going to be difficult, if not impossible, to develop any kind of a peaceful relationship with a religion that is set against us. I mean, it's hard to imagine how that's going to happen. And while I admire what the Pope's done, and Lord knows he's a lot smarter than I am, I can't help but thinking that the way forward to peace is through Jesus, and that the way forward through peace is through evangelism and transforming hearts forever.
More to come in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Carl Zorowski and Bishop Doc Loomis and Reverend Robert Cornegie. And our next article that we're going to take a look at actually comes from a TV station. It's out of San Diego, Fox News 5 there. And the headline is that San Diego's unified anti-Islamophobia effort sparks protests. So we got a lot of double negatives involved here. We have to be careful to kind of follow along. But it says 11 opponents of a new San Diego Unified School District program to combat Islamophobia on campuses appeared before the Board of Education Tuesday evening to protest during the public comment period. Citizens for Quality Education San Diego organized the effort because they oppose the implementation of anti-American Sharia law policies, that's their quote, at local schools. The group's founder, Mary Baker, told the board that she had 5 main complaints about their policy, including the district establishing formal partnerships with CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, which is partially funded by the terror group Hamas. Why single out Muslim culture? Baker asked. And Robert, that's the crux question I think that's asked in so many places. Is why, if you're going to teach about a religion, or why do you give deference to one over another? Because that's certainly been the complaint against Christians in the past.
Yeah, well, and it's always that, the argument is always the slippery slope argument that if you allow one to come in, like Christianity, if you have Bible studies and prayer groups and different things allowed on campuses while the students are there during their day, then you have to open it up to everybody. And so we're going to have everybody in there. But now this is a new twist on it, that the schools are actually proactively bringing in Islamic studies and teaching what the Quran teaches and all the customs of Islam. And they're doing it as from a multicultural justification. But it's only one culture. It's not multicultural because they've kicked out all the Christians. They can't have any of their stuff going on, but we can bring in Islam and introduce the students to it. So yeah, there's, we're seeing this happen repeated all around the country as different school districts try to figure out how to handle this.
Yeah, in DACA, they say, in their defense, they're doing it because there were 7 reported incidents of harassment based on religion in San Diego Unified Schools. And according, by comparison, there were 36 based on race and 21 on sex during the same period. So is that the true tipping point, you think, or is this really more about cultural accommodation?
This is cultural accommodation. Don't make any mistake about that. Look at the numbers. 7. How many millions of students are there in how many schools in San Diego?
Yeah.
7.
Mm-hmm.
And how do they differentiate between a racially motivated harassment and a religiously motivated? Well, let me tell you. If you're a Muslim, then it's religiously motivated. If you're black, yellow, red, white, whatever, then it's racial. And so what I'm getting at here is the Muslims are the only one that's, I mean, there's no, how many of these, were any of the 7 religiously motivated ones against Jews, Christians, Buddhists?
Right.
I don't have any idea. But 7 is like, I mean, look, I was a fat kid, all right? I know none of you can relate to that. But when you're in school and you're the fat kid, you get a lot of bullying. You get a lot of people that come after you. And I know there are anti-bullying laws, but how I wish my school district had taken on fat people the way that we're taking on this. This is simply, as you've said, and Robert has codified for us, this is just cultural accommodation, and it really has no place. It's just silly.
Carl?
Well, I was not the fat kid, all right? But I had a last name of Zarowski. I was harassed 7 times a week for being Polish. Okay, you guys ever heard a Polish joke? I could tell you every single one because I've always heard them. But I agree with Doc on these numbers. The numbers were shocking to me. That well, first of all, if you look at that, there are millions of students there, and I don't know if it's millions or if it's hundreds of thousands, but there's a lot of students, and this is a very small number.
This would be small for one school.
For one school, okay. But the fact that the group that had the smallest number has now got this program being instituted to make sure that nobody upsets anybody. Now, one thing the article doesn't talk about, have there been programs done about sexual harassment? Have there been programs put in place about, racial things? I don't know. All we know is the article's talking about the religious part of it.
130,000 students, by the way.
Okay, 130,000 students. But still, what kind of percentage is 7? It's not much. And if at that school you had you had 36 race-based incidents of harassment out of 130-some thousand, it sounds like they're doing a pretty good job there of keeping harassment down, or it's just not being reported.
Really? In the San Diego area? My goodness, you talk about...
And the quote at the meeting, listen to this. San Diego Schools defends the effort to fight Islamophobia. Muslim students are constantly being harassed, spit on, and verbally attacked.
Then why were there only 7? Why were there only 7 incidents then? But Robert, this is clearly, this is a red herring. It's about making the numbers the tipping point here, because that can't be the case.
Yeah. Well,
you know something about a school board's not paying attention to numbers, right?
If you don't keep up with this stuff, you really don't know what we're talking about. CARE is not spelled CARE. It's not what you're used to thinking about an organization called CARE. This is CAIR, and it's they are purposefully trying to infiltrate the public school system, as they already have the penal system, the prisons all around the country, and getting their objective is to normalize this Islamophobia. It's a victimization group. That's all that they're doing. And so they're dividing people according where has usually been over racist lines or whatever it is. We've got a new one now, and it's over religion. And I think that's a great point about anti-Jewish incidents. They don't even mention it in here. That there's even and we know that anti-Semitism has just skyrocketed.
There could even have been an anti-Christian incident here. We just don't know.
That's right. But they are purposefully magnifying this, going to the school boards. The active minority becomes what leads the process. And so we just have to know what's going on and come against it. I'm glad to see this group is actually standing up and saying, now, wait a minute, because they're getting funding. They're getting, people are going to pour CARE and CAIR and other groups are going to pour money into this program. It's going to be an established program before you know it.
Yeah, and again, but the point was, why single that out? I mean, why are we not exploring other religious cultures?
Well, we already know the danger. We just heard a little story in the break of the danger of comparative religion courses in universities and what those do. But, that's kind of where this thing is going. So you have this choice. Do we keep it all out or do we, let in one? Do we have to let them all? I'm glad I'm not on the school board. I just tell you that, because that is it's a dilemma.
Yeah.
Well, another question would be: you've got this policy that's coming in. Who is reviewing the policy for the school board? I mean, I think that's a legitimate question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. What's appropriate? What's not appropriate?
Mm-hmm. Right.
I mean, I'm sure CAIR, CAIR,
is going to provide a curriculum.
Has provided the curriculum.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But who gets to decide whether that is a good curriculum or a bad curriculum? Well,
sounds like CAIR does.
CAIR says, well, here it is. This is what you need to do. And then the school board says, okay, we'll do it.
Or if they say, well, we're not going to do this part, then the protests come back again.
Right.
So,
right.
And now, Robert,
you're misrepresenting our faith. Is basically it.
Robert,
Sorry.
you've seen this discussion of curriculum, and that supposedly people are going to choose, and they're going to do parts of a curriculum and not parts of another. You've had that discussion.
We're going through that right now in our county and in this state, and really across the nation, as the tide that came through the Obama administration that pushed the sexual risk reduction model over the sexual risk avoidance model, which we had before.
Right.
And so now we're seeing the consequences of this. And the sad thing about it is the administration has changed, but most of the people in those positions, those bureaucratic positions that do the DPI stuff, Department of Public Instruction, it's the same people are still in there.
Yeah. And so the political correctness umbrella extends here too. I mean,
exactly.
That's what they're battling over in
right.
San Diego. So, the case here, I don't know. We haven't seen a follow up yet about it, whether or not they actually are going to go in there. But it doesn't look like anything's going to stop them. I mean, the protests. You know how that works, and the protest sometimes makes nice copy, but then there it ends.
Yeah, I mean, there's speeches given at meetings, and the board members can't respond to it because they're not on the agenda. The trick is getting on the agenda, and then if you do get on the agenda, then it's politics.
Well, and we have another article coming up about prayer. So this again falls into some of these same things. We'll find out how that goes too when we come back in a moment here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Again, I'm Ben Ball along with Reverend Robert Cornegy, Bishop Doc Loomis, and Reverend Carl Zarowski, and we'll be back in just a moment. You're listening to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and I'm Ben Ball along with Reverend Robert Cornegy, Bishop Doc Loomis, and Reverend Carl Zarowski as we take a look at other matters of faith that are in the news for today. And this one comes out of Indiana, and this is from the News and Tribune in Indiana. School prayer bill goes to governor. House Bill 1024 protects religious expression of students. A bill that aims to protect students who wish to express their religious beliefs in schools is awaiting final approval from Governor Eric Holcomb. On Tuesday, the President of the Senate signed House Bill 1024, joining House Speaker and President Pro Tem. The measure prevents schools from discriminating against students based on their religious beliefs. As a strong supporter of the First Amendment, I believe in the right of free expression, including religious expression, said Representative Ed Clare, representative from Republican from New Albany, who voted in favor of the bill. There's no reason students shouldn't be able to express their religious beliefs in school as long, this is a key part of the law here, as long as it's not disruptive. Under the law, students will be allowed to take part in religious activities during school hours, including prayer. The bill allows students to express their religious beliefs in schoolwork, whether it be writing, art, or oral assignments. Clothing, accessories, and jewelry displaying religious messages and symbols are protected by the measure. Okay, now this is a lot broader than many other kinds of measures that have come up before. Robert, you've watched this over the years and come and go in different ways.
Yeah, well, there's obviously been a long. I mean, this prayer was taken out of schools in the '60s, right? 1960s.
Yeah,
that's when it basically happened.
Madeline Murray O'Hare.
Yeah, that's right. And so we have a 50-year. I mean, excuse me. Yeah, 50 years basically of 60 years, perhaps. Mm-hmm. My math is not good, but of this being the norm is that you just don't do this stuff in public schools. If you want to do that, you have the choice to go to a private school where you can do all of that stuff you want to. But in the government schools, you're not allowed to do that. And so that's the norm. We've had 2 generations basically grow up in that. I'm dating myself, but I was pre that. So.
Yeah, right.
So we actually had prayers said over the intercom in our public schools when I was growing up in Goldsboro. But, that went out as I was graduating from high school. So, now they're saying, okay, we'll bring it back in. Well, the first thing, we here, Christians tend to think about is, wow, we can get back into schools. But that's not limited to just Christians, I'm pretty sure. No. That's going to be everybody.
And it's activities by the students.
Correct.
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me about this bill is that because we have seen schools misunderstand the First Amendment, misunderstand what free expression of religion means and what are the restrictions, what the court has said. I mean, there are law firms that have made a living out of just defending this kind of actions one way or another. This one says that, if you happen to mention Jesus or Allah in an artwork or in a composition or in an essay, it's not to be counted against. If it's germane to the subject. So. And we've had a lot of schools, Carl, that don't understand that and misunderstood that over the years.
Right. I was reading an article just this morning about, now this was at a university level, that there was a professor who jumped all over a student for reading the Bible during the 6 minutes before class began. Mm-hmm. And even brought in some higher officials from the school to get this whole thing straightened out. Now, when I was in public school, like you had said, prayer went out of the school back in the 1960s. Okay, I'm a little bit younger than you, mm-hmm. but we still had prayer in school mm-hmm. up through the early 70s. And, I guess our teachers were violating the law, but nobody got all up in an uproar about mm-hmm. it. And then in high school, we were allowed to have Bible studies during lunch or anything like that. Nobody questioned anything about it. If you wore a cross around your neck, nobody said anything about it. You could wish people Merry Christmas, Happy Easter. Nobody said anything about it. The only thing we didn't understand was why all of the Jewish children in the school got more holidays than we did.
Right.
How come we didn't get to take those days off that they did?
Well, also, we had fish sticks on Friday.
Right, we did too. Fish sticks on Friday because we had a lot of Catholics in the school.
Yeah.
And nobody questioned any of that.
Yeah.
But now, like you said, Ben, you mentioned Jesus. And I'd never thought about the thing of if you mention him in a paper, that you could get marked down for that.
Right. Well, I experienced that actually in
I hope it wasn't in seminary.
4th grade in Durham, when we were discussing or learning about how the world was created, And we would do various models. We would talk about how, and so one of the ones I chose was out of Genesis. And so I wrote about that, and I got marked down for that. And my dad wrote a very long missive about that, going backwards, going back to the teacher, who I adored this teacher. But she marked me down for using that. And I came up with other theories, but that too. But so I think this becomes. This is I like the broad nature of this, and that that it protects free expression of religion in many ways. Again, Doc, as long as it's not disruptive, right?
Yeah, I underlined that word. Labeling what's disruptive. That's the rub right there. Mm-hmm. That's where this whole thing goes. It goes from flash blue flame clear down to muddy gray smoke. I don't know how you. What's this? If I have a shirt on that says Jesus is the only way, and a Muslim says, well, that's disruptive, then is that? I mean, will they go? Yeah, that is kind of disruptive. I mean, you making that claim, you're really disrupting a lot of people here. I don't know.
But are you disrupting the education process? I mean, that's the
if it comes to a fist fight in the hallway and. Yeah. I mean, it's entirely possible, if it becomes an issue, if it becomes a topic of conversation.
Yeah, but then again, it's just one of many issues why a fist fight in the hallway takes place. It just joins the club.
I think the thing that's frustrating for me is there's a piece in the article that it says that there's strong bipartisan support for the bill, but some have criticized the extension of religious practices into public schools. See, there's your defense. Why, there's a separation of church and state, and we're extending our religious practices into the school. No, actually not. They were there before this, and now we're just protecting their right to remain there. This is not, as it's often said, a bunch of religious zealots trying to take over our schools. No, we just want our religion protected in all places, including our schools.
To me, this is actually normalizing religious life. I mean, that's much more effective to me than just saying, "Oh, well, we will have prayer over the loudspeakers." Yeah, I have an issue about whose prayer is that going to be, sure. But this one just seems to be that kids can take their life doesn't have to end at the church. Their religious life doesn't have to end at the church grounds.
Right, and this gives me an opportunity to learn from another student in the class who has a different faith than I do, and we can sit and we can talk about it with each other.
In class.
How about
that?
I don't have to have a group coming in sanctioned by the school board to teach me about my friend's religion and why I need to tiptoe around certain issues with him or with her.
It's interesting that I'm with an organization called Ratio Christi that teaches students at universities, that's how it began, how to defend their Christian faith against in this marketplace of ideas so that we can get back into the game of talking about truth and where truth comes from, that kind of stuff. And in the last 2 years, we've opened up chapters in high schools. We call it Ratio Christi Prep. Mm-hmm. And it's to help high school students because we discovered that by the time, if we just start when they get to college, we're almost too late. Mm-hmm. We really have to begin earlier than that. And so we're looking at working with a couple of the schools in the area to try to establish some chapters where we can have that kind of discussion going on, because this is it's for those that believe, regardless of the source of their belief. For those that believe, this is a vital part of their life. And what we've done is, we've bifurcated, we've divided this thing. We've got this sacred and secular thing going on.
It's your safe space for your religion.
Yeah, exactly.
But this is, let's not miss, this is a money issue. That's all this is. This is all about codifying something so that schools can't be sued and don't have to live under the fear of constant lawsuit.
Right.
The reason that schools give in to the ACLUs and all these other groups is because they just really don't want, their school boards really don't want to go through all the legal wranglings and all the expense that's associated with it, and so they just give in. I mean, a lot of the folks that I know in schools right now in administrative positions actually have the same kind of beliefs that we talk about every Sunday morning with you guys. But the reality is, when it comes to a lawsuit that could severely hinder education, they just give in. And what this says is, you don't have to do that anymore. We're going to protect you. You can't be sued for this.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How is that bad?
You know, this article actually says the prayer that was ruled illegal or against the Establishment Clause in the 1962 Supreme Court case. I don't think I've ever actually seen it printed out before. The prayer was simply, Almighty God, we acknowledge our dependence upon Thee, and we beg Thy blessings upon us, our parents, our teachers, and our country. Sounds like a National Day of Prayer to offer. And that one is certainly benign. Now, you can imagine some others that you might not agree with that might come out of a school-written prayer. That's not the issue here. The issue here is what the students can express, how they can express it. Now, will it also extend to the teachers? That will be interesting as well. See how that gets challenged in the days to come. We'll have more to come here on Faith Matters on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. Hey, welcome back to Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240. And I'm Ben Ball, along with Reverend Robert Cornegy from Chapel by the Sea in Emerald Isle. Also, Reverend Carl Zorowski from St. Peter's United Methodist Church, and retired Anglican Bishop, Bishop Doc Loomis, is with us as well. So as we look at this, maybe I should apologize to those listeners who only get that last segment, because we usually do something a little bit more lighthearted. Didn't have as many sources of lighthearted material this week, so this one definitely is not. But it is part of the news from this past couple of weeks. This comes from theconversation.com, and is the death penalty unchristian? Arkansas executed a fourth prisoner on death row Sunday night. 3 days prior to that, the state had done 2 back-to-back executions by lethal injections in Lincoln County, Arkansas. 4 other executions have been blocked by court order. As a Catholic scholar, this is written by Matthew Schmaltz, Schmalz, I think it is. As a Catholic scholar who writes about religion, politics, and policy, I understand how Christians struggle with the death penalty. There are those who cannot endure the idea, and there are those who support its use. Some Christian theologians have also observed that capital punishment could lead to the conversion of criminals who might repent of their crimes when faced with the finality of death. So is the death penalty anti-Christian? His article goes on to present 2 sides and includes classics and some classic ancient writers, and right up through the 50s and 60s, and then those who support the death penalty and those who have a case against the death penalty. So is this a worthy discussion for us as Christians to have?
Sure.
First of all.
Yeah, it's important theological position. You know, if you're living your life according to the Word of God, then you really need to wrestle through these issues. And this is one of the key ones. What's the role of the state? What's the role of the church in these matters? How does that work out? Did God have a hand in any of this process? What does God say about this? How do we work through that? And you really do have to kind of begin at the beginning and go all the way through in context of how that works. And it's very important. It comes up not frequently, but occasionally in some of the teaching opportunities in the church. Yeah.
Anybody else want to weigh in right away, Carl?
Well, we have been studying the book of Genesis in a weekly Bible study, and we just got out of the ark with Noah. And God has made his covenant with Noah and the bow in the sky. And he says, as part of this, he says, whoever sheds the blood of a human, by a human shall that person's blood be shed. And, this is not saying if someone kills somebody, then you have to go and kill them. But what it's saying is you take a person's life. God has judgment on that person. There should be punishment for that person. And God counts on us to mete out that punishment. He's the one who decides, but we're the ones who carry it out. And you get into the discussions of eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth, and people will look at that and say, well, that justifies killing somebody for killing somebody else. What it does is it puts limits on what we can do for somebody. Somebody steals your cow, you can get a cow from them, but no more. You can only exact so much vengeance on a person. And I believe that for the crime of murder, is death appropriate for that? I think that's very arguable that it is. For the crime of something other than murder, should death be the punishment? According to what God says here, no.
Doc, a lot of people also would say that, though, that Jesus, in his covenant with us, makes it for a different argument, and might cite that as being against. What do you think?
Are you testing me to see if I know the turn the other cheek verse?
That's the classic one.
Yes, I certainly understand that, but I actually don't think that the law went away with him. And here's the challenge: is we have our friend Pope Francis in this article again. Did you notice at the end?
Yes.
And Pope Francis observes that the death penalty is no longer relevant because modern prisons prevent criminals from doing further harm.
It sounds more like a secular
Let me share a
argument.
little factoid with you. Yeah. The average time spent behind bars for murder is 7 months. Did you know that? Isn't that a fascinating fact? 7 months. Now, that's all kind of homicides, but that's the average. So if what we're saying is that this is in the U.S. now. So if what we're saying is that if you murder somebody, we will put you in jail and that will protect society, that is a lie. That absolutely is, it just simply isn't true. Secondly, if you murder somebody, then the people that ultimately become responsible for the burden of your transgression is us, because we're the ones that wind up paying for you to be there. Now, I know these sound like very unchristian things, but I just want to correct what's out there right now in terms of, why don't we just put them in prison? And the reason is there's nowhere to put them, and they don't stay there when we put them there. And the recidivism rate is extremely high. We're talking about people who commit significant acts, rape, murder, 58% recidivism rate. So what's that tell us? If you murder somebody, you're probably going to be in prison about 7 months, and you got about a 60% chance that you're going to do it again when you come out. That doesn't feel like protecting society to me. The number of people that have come back from capital punishment and redone their crime is a staggering 0%.
Yeah, and I think where we kind of theologically, where we have to begin is, why would, in the Ten Commandments, of course, we have a commandment, thou shalt not kill, or better translated, thou shalt not murder, is really what that means. And when we, the value that of life, the sacredness of life is really at the root of all of this. It's kind of been reversed. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like people nowadays say, oh, well, Christians that believe in capital punishment are doing it because they're vengeful, and they want to exact punishment, and they want to hurt somebody. There's this morbid thing out of it, but actually, what capital punishment does is it magnifies the value of life, and in chapter 6, I think it is, of Genesis, where after the flood, it changed. You remember when Cain killed Abel, mm-hmm. What was the punishment?
The punishment was that he was sent off to be by himself. He was taken out of society, but he was also, given protection so that nobody else would kill him.
That's exactly
right. But life for him at that time was being there with family. That was taken away from him when he was sent away.
Yeah, so that can be a justification for imprisonment or life imprisonment or whatnot. But what you see in chapter 6...
It's actually chapter 9.
Chapter 9, excuse me, verse 6. Chapter 9, verse 6. Sorry, you're right. In chapter 9, there's a new covenant. Mm-hmm. And you read the deal.
That's right.
It changed. And anyone who murders a human being shall be
put to death.
put to death.
But the funny thing about this, to me, or the ironic thing about this, is, again, and I'm not, listen, I think the Pope's kind of interesting in a lot of ways, and I'm not trying to beat up on him, but trust me when I tell you, the Swiss Guard that protect him are standing there with, very heavy weaponry, and if somebody jumps the wall and runs toward the papal suite, they will be shot dead. So the punishment for attempting to do something to the Pope is you're dead.
Right.
So how do how can you say on the one hand, I don't think we should have capital punishment, and yet I've authorized the very troops to protect me to shoot to kill if somebody doesn't kill me but even comes near me? This is another. It's one of those places where the sacred and the secular come and commingle, and it's very confusing.
Let me offer another one. Now, this is arguments that you often will hear. Some will say that it costs a lot of money for the state to keep somebody around for life. That's a big money issue, and therefore we should go ahead and even when it's being delayed, the average stay on death row is up above a decade. So it should not be delayed for that reason, because it costs so much. But then you have that argument. Well, wait a minute, isn't that also the argument for abortion? Is that if that abortion is cheaper to do that than it is to have these kids running around?
You can't morally. There is no real moral equation there between the death of an innocent child and the death of a person who has committed an act of murder. And really, I mean, capital punishment is the ultimate last resort. I mean, it is not to be used you go through all the measures. I mean, someone that goes on to death row now, they've got 20 years, 2 decades usually, of the appeal process, because they're trying to make sure that there are no mistakes here. We know it occasionally happens. That's another justification. But there's no moral equivalence between the murder of an innocent child in the womb and the execution of a man or woman who has committed murder of another person. Those are two different things. So they're conflating the issues.
Thanks for joining us on today's Faith Matters here on the Talk Station, FM 107 and AM 1240, and I hope that you'll join us again next week.
Thank you for joining us for Faith Matters. Email your comments, questions, and suggestions to faithmatters@thetalkstation.com.
Give me faith, trust what you say, that you're good and your love is great. I'm broken inside, I'll give you my life. Give me faith.
Faith Matters is a production of the Talk Station.